Hi, I'm Tom. I'm going to talk a little bit about my time that I spent in Jena in East Germany last year. I'm going to look at 6 different key questions and explain some of my units and sort of the wider experience that I had whilst I was there. First thing I want to look at is what did I aim to achieve sort of before I went out to Jena itself. The first thing was to gain a much better cultural understanding of the German people and also German university life. So that's not just spending time in lectures and sort of what lectures were like, but also how the university sort of operated as a whole. I also wanted to focus on different perspectives that people from different backgrounds, so for example Germans from each end of the political spectrum over there, sort of how they reacted to different geopolitical topics that we might have looked at when we were at university back in Bournemouth. I also wanted to look at more sort of personal objectives and do as much travelling as I could whilst I was there. So I really wanted to explore surrounding areas, I wanted to visit countries and particularly visit areas of political significance. For example, we went to Potsdam, just outside of Berlin. The final thing I wanted to aim to do is just meet people from different countries, meet people from different backgrounds, and so that they would be contacts for life. The second thing I wanted to look at is how I overcame obstacles that I encountered and what those obstacles were with achieving my aims. Being out in Germany wasn't an easy thing at all. We came across a number of different problems and had to work with them in order to achieve our goals. One of the main things that I had a problem with was German bureaucracy and German culture. Generally, compared to time we spent in Britain, they were somewhat unwilling to help. So that's things like when we had to apply for exam cards, report cards, or they called it a course card, which was basically getting your card stamped at the end of the year to say that you'd done certain units and things like that. This was incredibly difficult to achieve, I found, and the Germans have very strict ways in which things are done. So for example, you have to visit a particular person between say 1 and 2 on a Thursday, and that was the only time that you could speak to this person and the only time when they'd be able to help you get stuff done. And I found that different to how things would operate over here in the UK. The way we got around that was not by changing anything, of course, it was just by adapting to their culture. It was something that was different, it was something that we had to learn, and you just became more organised and became, I guess, more German in how things operate. Another thing was the language barriers. That was a huge challenge for us. Myself, I'd done some very basic German before I went out there. Alistair had done even less, and we went out there having to study English units, in units in English only, because we weren't at a language level that would enable us to study in German. That limited our choice quite considerably, and it also limited communication, because although a lot of people out there, particularly students, could speak very, very good English, there were also lecturers particularly who couldn't, and therefore interacting with them was difficult, and it was sometimes difficult to get across points within lectures, but also outside of. If I was having trouble with something, perhaps we didn't know how to fill out a certain form, or even like apply for a bus pass or something like that. It was very difficult to go to someone and explain to them exactly what you needed when really our only language was English. We got around that by buddying up, I guess, and knowing who was a good English speaker. So when we had real problems, we could go to someone who you knew that you could be understood with, but also by furthering our German and doing what we could to increase our language skills when we were there. And I did that through one of the units, which I'll talk about very quickly later. Another difficult thing was just adapting to a very different way of life. The Germans live very differently. One of the things I always joked about, but was the way the supermarkets worked. You don't have your £3 meal deal over there in Germany. In fact, it was a lot more structured, and you're expected to sort of make your own meals at home. There was less of a fast food culture and things like that, which in a weird way doesn't sound a big thing, but was difficult to adapt to. A quick overview of the units that I did and sort of how I worked with the different lecturers to achieve my academic goals while I was over there. So the first one was called American Conservatism, and I found this unit somewhat less engaging than the others, mainly because it was very focused on a historical perspective of politics within America. It was very factually interesting. There was a lot of deep reading, and we studied quite hard to learn the different aspects of American politics that were in the syllabus. The lectures themselves were very structured, so each and every seminar we would have a student giving a presentation, and then following that we would have a student presenting and assessing a reading, and that was the same for each of the 12, 14 seminars or however there were in the term period. It was different. Usually I think at Bournemouth we have a much more varied curriculum and we'll do lots of different things, but no less interesting, and I definitely learned a lot through the course. In that particular unit there wasn't much space for free thinking. I didn't have much opportunity to express my own opinion on subjects. In fact, we were just sort of regurgitating from the course material and from the books, and we're expected to learn that. The second course I did was called Deutsch als Fremdsprache, which is basically basic German language. So that was good because it enabled me to further my language skills and develop within a classroom environment that spoke exclusively German. So if I'd have learnt German over here in the UK, then we may well be talking in English, but there were people in my class who didn't speak English and were learning German alongside me. Perhaps their native language was Mandarin or something along those lines. And that sort of forces you to develop your language skills very quickly. I found it very engaging. I really enjoyed it, and it's one of the things that I wish I could have done for longer. The third unit we did was called Courts, Democracy and the Rule of Law. Again, it was something that we studied from books predominantly, and had a number of written texts that we learned from each time. We were expected to do 2 presentations during the period on one of the readings or on one of the topics. This was an individual thing. However, we sort of worked alongside classmates in order to develop ideas, to develop our presentations, and also the activities that came along with them. The unit was very different to Bournemouth, predominantly again due to the structure. It was structured very formally, and it was stuck to each time. There was less room for me to go, oh, hang on, I've got this really interesting idea, let's talk about it. We didn't have that opportunity at all. The unit that I found the most interesting was the fourth one, and it's called, it was a reading unit based on a book called Paul Mason's Post-Capitalism. And the reading unit meant that basically we were studying a book and we were talking about a book in each and every seminar. There were no lectures involved, anything like that. We were expected to go away and read this book, and then we'd come back each seminar and talk about a chapter. We were each given a different a chapter, and we had our set seminar. When we would report back, we would set an activity and we'd then ask questions based on that to the rest of the seminar group. The seminar group was very small, or reading group as they called it. It was around, I think, only 6 or 7 people, which made for a very it developed a really good group that we were really good at developing ideas, and we looked at this very interesting idea of capitalism beyond where we're at now and where we're going forward. And it was quite an abstract kind of concept that had come through from this guy Paul Mason, and I felt very much at home in that lecture. It felt very much like something we would do at Bournemouth University. The fifth and final lecture unit was something that I didn't quite believe when I first saw it, and it was called The Sociology of Game of Thrones, was the title of the unit, and it basically looked at Game of Thrones as a political sort of situation and compared different political aspects in the real world and geopolitical issues to things that were then represented in Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was just the basis for it. It was just the examples that we used. Actually, we looked at much deeper issues when it came to immigration, when it came to wider political things. So we'd look at different political leaders, for example, and say, okay, who are they similar to in this book, Game of Thrones, and how can we use that to help explain to people why they act in a certain way, or what kind of person they are, what are their underlying moral values and things like that when it comes to political decisions. I find it very interesting, and the particularly main thing that came from it was the fact that we had people in that class from all different parts of the world, and their perspective on things were very different. Key advice and just some activities and excursions that I would definitely take away with you when you go to Jena and explore much more when you're there. There's a program called ESN, which is the Erasmus Student Network. They ran activities almost every week, which included things like trips away locally. It also included just social events that allowed you to interact with other people who were on the Erasmus programme. It was fantastic. It was definitely where I sort of met my best friends while I was out there, and it was where I sort of made the most memories and what I'd take away. Key advice is work hard really on your language. You're there in Germany, and you've got an opportunity of a lifetime to explore a language that you may not be fluent in. Whilst you're there, you can practice. As soon as you come back, then it will just be classroom stuff if you continue learning. So make the most of that when you're there. Be financially ready as well. It was expensive. The funding that you get out there doesn't quite cover the expenditure that it has, particularly if you want to go out and travel. You want to go out to Austria and Poland and surrounding areas, which I truly recommend. So really try and save some money away to enable to do that, for you to do that when you're there. The last thing to leave you was with, you stay there as long as you can. Don't be tempted to pop home too often. Make the most of it. As soon as you're back, then you've said goodbye to that experience. So spend as much time out there as you possibly can with the funding and sort of the academic schedule. And when you come back, you'll be able to sit here like me and think that you've had a fantastic time. If you've got any questions at all after watching this, then please do get in contact with me. I'll be happy to advise anyone on how to make the most of their experience in Jena or anywhere else similar. And I'd love to hear from you when you've come back. Thank you very much.